Blood trickled down Zoe's face as Officer Benson twisted her arm behind her back. The first-class cabin fell silent. "Daddy!" she screamed as the walkway door burst open. The flight attendant's jaw dropped when Gabriel Wilson, SkyWest's CEO, stormed in. "Release my daughter, now!" Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed discrimination on public transportation. The events you're about to hear will make you question everything about how we treat each other in supposedly civilized spaces. 16-year-old Zoe Wilson settled into her plush first-class seat on SkyWest Airlines Flight 237 from Chicago to New York. Her fingers traced the soft leather armrest as she gazed out the window, watching ground crew prepare for departure. The excitement of visiting her grandmother in Manhattan and touring NYU's engineering program made her heart race. As the daughter of SkyWest Airlines CEO Gabriel Wilson, flying was in her blood. She dreamed of becoming an aviation engineer, designing the next generation of aircraft that would revolutionize travel. The boarding process continued around her as Zoe pulled out her notebook filled with sketches of wing designs and aerodynamic calculations. Math problems that would confuse most adults were casual entertainment for her brilliant mind. Her father often joked that she'd been solving equations before learning to tie her shoes. "Excuse me," a sharp voice interrupted her thoughts. Zoe looked up to see flight attendant Melissa Peterson standing over her, a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes plastered across her face. "Can I help you?" Zoe asked politely. "I just need to verify you're in the correct seat," Melissa said, her tone suggesting Zoe was somewhere she didn't belong. "I am, thank you," Zoe replied, offering her boarding pass. "Seat 3A. Melissa barely glanced at the ticket before handing it back. "Very well." She moved on without another word. Zoe returned to her notebook, but couldn't help noticing how Melissa warmly greeted the older white businessman across the aisle. "Good afternoon, Mr. Lancaster. Can I get you a pre-flight beverage? Perhaps your usual scotch on the rocks?" "Thank you, Melissa. That would be perfect," he replied with a familiar nod. Zoe observed Melissa chatting pleasantly with every white passenger in first class, offering drinks and hanging jackets. When she finally returned to Zoe's row, her demeanor changed completely. "Do you need anything?" she asked curtly. "Could I have some water, please?" Zoe requested. "We'll be serving beverages after takeoff," Melissa replied before walking away, despite having just served several other passengers. The pattern continued throughout boarding. Melissa checked on Zoe repeatedly, each time with thinly veiled suspicion. "Are you sure this is your seat?" she asked again 20 minutes later, despite having already verified Zoe's boarding pass. "Yes, I'm sure," Zoe responded, growing uncomfortable with the scrutiny. "It's just unusual for someone your age to be traveling alone in first class," Melissa remarked loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Zoe felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "My ticket is valid. I'm allowed to be here." As the flight prepared for departure, Melissa approached again. "A passenger has reported some suspicious behavior from you," she stated coldly. Zoe looked around, bewildered. She had been sitting quietly, working in her notebook. "What suspicious behavior? I've just been sitting here." "Don't use that tone with me," Melissa warned. "I need to see your ID and boarding pass again." Zoe reached for her wallet, hands trembling slightly from the unexpected confrontation. She produced her student ID and boarding pass once more. Melissa examined them with exaggerated scrutiny. "This ID could be fake. How old are you really?" "I'm 16, Zoe answered, her voice wavering. "I'm traveling to visit my grandmother and tour NYU. I have the right to be here." The confrontation was starting to attract attention from nearby passengers. An elderly white woman in the row behind Zoe watched with concern. "If you can't verify your identity properly, you may need to move to another section," Melissa threatened. "But I have a valid ticket for this seat," Zoe protested, growing upset at being singled out when she'd done nothing wrong. The interaction triggered memories of previous discrimination Zoe had faced. The security guard who followed her through an upscale department store. The teacher who accused her of cheating because her test scores were suspiciously high. The countless times people assumed she didn't belong in certain spaces because of her skin color. "You need to calm down," Melissa warned. "Otherwise, I'll have to call security to remove you from the aircraft." Zoe, hands shaking, pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my father." She dialed Gabriel's number, desperate for intervention before the situation escalated further. "Dad, I need your help. The flight attendant keeps—" The call dropped as the plane's door closed, signaling imminent departure. "Cell phones need to be in airplane mode now," Melissa said with satisfaction. Then she leaned closer to Zoe. "One more disruption from you, and you're off this flight." Zoe put her phone away, fighting back tears as she noticed other passengers watching uncomfortably. No one spoke up. No one intervened. The isolation felt suffocating. Minutes later, Melissa was back, this time with the phone connected to the aircraft. "Security to first class, please. We have a situation with an unruly passenger." The cabin fell silent as Airport Security Officer Kevin Benson strode down the aisle, his heavy footsteps announcing his arrival before he reached the first-class section. Standing 6'3" with broad shoulders that strained against his uniform, his presence was deliberately intimidating. He stopped at Zoe's row, towering over her. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, directing the question to Melissa rather than Zoe. "This young woman has been disruptive and refuses to verify her right to be in first class," Melissa explained, arms crossed. "Several passengers have complained." This was a lie. No one had complained. In fact, most passengers had been engrossed in their pre-flight routines until Melissa's repeated confrontations with Zoe drew their attention. "Sir, I have a valid ticket," Zoe began, reaching for her boarding pass again. "I've shown it multiple times already and—" "I'm not talking to you right now," Officer Benson interrupted, holding up his hand to silence her. "Let the flight attendant explain the situation." Melissa smirked slightly. "She's been argumentative since boarding. I believe she may have obtained this seat fraudulently. When questioned, she became belligerent." Zoe's eyes widened at the blatant mischaracterization. "That's not true. I've been sitting quietly. You keep coming over and—" "See what I mean?" Melissa cut in. "Completely disrespectful to crew instructions." Officer Benson turned his attention to Zoe, his expression hardening. "Young lady, flight crew instructions are federal law. You need to comply immediately or face serious consequences." "But I haven't done anything wrong," Zoe protested, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I showed my ticket. I have every right to be here." "Stand up," Officer Benson demanded. "What?" "Stand up and collect your belongings. You're being moved to another section." Zoe remained seated. "No, I paid for this seat. I've broken no rules." Around her, passengers began pulling out phones, recording the escalating confrontation. The plane was now delayed from its scheduled departure time, still sitting at the gate. An elderly white woman in the row behind Zoe, Eleanor Thompson, finally spoke up. "Officer, if I may, this young lady has been nothing but polite. It's the flight attendant who keeps harassing her for no reason." Benson barely acknowledged Eleanor. "Ma'am, please stay out of this. It's a security matter." "It's discrimination is what it is," Eleanor replied firmly, but Benson had already turned back to Zoe. "Last chance. Get up voluntarily, or I will remove you." Zoe gripped her armrests, heart pounding. "I want to speak to the captain. This is racial profiling." Melissa's face flushed with anger. "How dare you accuse me of—" "That's it," Benson interrupted. "You're coming with me now." He reached for Zoe's arm, grabbing her roughly and pulling her from the seat. Zoe resisted instinctively, trying to stand on her own terms rather than be manhandled. "Stop! You're hurting me!" she cried out. In the struggle, Zoe's backpack fell open, spilling its contents across the floor. Books, her wallet, headphones, and a framed photograph scattered under seats. The photo showed Zoe standing proudly beside her father, both wearing SkyWest uniforms during a company Bring Your Child to Work Day. Gabriel Wilson's name badge was clearly visible, identifying him as CEO. Officer Benson ignored the photo, focusing instead on subduing Zoe. As he yanked her into the aisle, her momentum carried her forward, and her forehead struck the metal armrest of the seat opposite. The impact opened a small cut above her eyebrow. Blood began trickling down Zoe's face as gasps echoed throughout the cabin. Using the momentary shock to his advantage, Benson twisted Zoe's arm behind her back and clicked handcuffs around her wrists. "You are being removed for interfering with flight crew duties," he announced loudly, as if performing for an audience. Tears mixed with blood on Zoe's cheeks as she was marched toward the front of the plane. The humiliation burned worse than the physical pain. Every passenger watched as she was paraded down the aisle like a criminal, blood dripping onto her white blouse, hands secured behind her back. "Someone call my dad," she pleaded to the rows of shocked faces. "Please, someone call Gabriel Wilson." "Stop talking," Benson ordered, tightening his grip. As they reached the front of the aircraft, Melissa stepped forward with Zoe's scattered belongings hastily shoved into her backpack. "Don't forget your things," she said with barely concealed satisfaction. Through her tears, Zoe could see passengers recording the incident on their phones. Some looked away uncomfortably. Others watched with undisguised interest, as if viewing entertainment rather than injustice. Only Eleanor Thompson had stood up, following them to the front of the plane despite her arthritic knees, calling out that this was wrong. Just as Officer Benson prepared to drag Zoe off the aircraft, the cockpit door opened. The captain emerged, looking confused by the delay. "What's happening here?" he asked, taking in the scene with growing concern. "Removing a disruptive passenger, sir," Benson replied confidently. "We'll be ready for departure in 2 minutes." The captain looked at Zoe, handcuffed, bleeding, and terrified, then back at Benson. Before he could speak, Zoe made one final desperate plea. "My father is Gabriel Wilson. He's the CEO of this airline. Please call him." Have you ever witnessed someone abuse their authority only to discover they picked the wrong person to bully? Comment number 1 if you believe Melissa and Officer Benson should lose their jobs for their treatment of Zoe. Like this video if you've ever experienced or witnessed racial profiling in a public space. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that expose injustice and celebrate when karma finally arrives. Now, what do you think will happen when Zoe's father discovers how his daughter is being treated on his own airline? 40 minutes earlier, in SkyWest's downtown Chicago headquarters, Gabriel Wilson sat at the head of a gleaming conference table, surrounded by executives discussing quarterly projections. At 52, Gabriel commanded respect not just through his position as CEO, but through his presence, tall, distinguished, with intelligence shining in his dark eyes. He had worked his way up from baggage handler to the executive suite through determination and brilliance, breaking barriers as one of the few black CEOs of a major airline. His phone vibrated against the table. Gabriel typically ignored calls during board meetings, but seeing his daughter's name flash across the screen sent a jolt of concern through him. Zoe never called during school hours unless it was an emergency. "Excuse me," he said, rising from his chair. "I need to take this." He stepped into the hallway. "Zoe, is everything all right?" Her panicked voice came through. "Dad, I need your help. The flight attendant keeps—" The call cut off abruptly. Gabriel immediately tried calling back, but the call went straight to voicemail. A cold feeling settled in his stomach. Zoe was supposed to be on SkyWest Flight 237 to New York by now. Gabriel strode back into the boardroom. "Meeting adjourned. We have an emergency." Without waiting for responses, he pulled up the flight tracking system on his tablet. Flight 237 was still at the gate, delayed from its scheduled departure. Something was wrong. "Sir," his assistant Jason looked concerned. "What's happening?" "My daughter's in trouble, on Flight 237. Get me Captain Reynolds on the radio now," Gabriel ordered, already moving toward the elevator. "The helicopter's ready on the roof for the airport tour," Jason called after him. "Should I tell them to keep it running? I'm going to O'Hare, now." Within minutes, Gabriel was in the company helicopter, flying over Chicago's gridlocked traffic. His mind raced with possibilities. Zoe wasn't prone to exaggeration or panic. If she was calling for help, the situation was serious. He got through to Captain Reynolds just as the helicopter approached the airport. David, it's Gabriel Wilson. What's happening on your aircraft? The captain's voice crackled through. Sir, we have a security situation. Airport police are removing a disruptive passenger. Gabriel's heart sank. Is it a young black girl, about 16? A pause. Yes, sir. How did you… That's my daughter, David. Keep her on that plane. I'll be there in 3 minutes. Gabriel could hear confusion in the captain's voice. Your daughter? But the flight attendant said, whatever she said is wrong. Zoe has every right to be on that flight. Do not let anyone remove her until I get there. That's a direct order. The helicopter touched down on the tarmac, and Gabriel sprinted across to the terminal, flashing his executive ID to bypass security checkpoints. His heart pounded against his ribs as he ran, not from exertion, but from fear. The unique fear that grips parents when their children are in danger. Meanwhile, on the plane, Captain Reynolds had emerged from the cockpit just as Officer Benson was preparing to drag Zoe off the aircraft. Hold on, the captain said, uncertainty in his voice. I just received a call from Mr. Wilson. We need to wait. Who? Benson asked dismissively. Gabriel Wilson, the CEO of SkyWest. He says this is his daughter. Melissa laughed nervously. That's ridiculous. She's lying to avoid consequences. I'm not lying, Zoe cried, blood still trickling down her face. Why won't anyone believe me? Benson hesitated, looking between the captain and Melissa. We can sort this out off the plane. I'm removing her now. He yanked Zoe toward the exit, ignoring the captain's protests. Just as they reached the aircraft door, it burst open from the outside. Gabriel Wilson stood in the doorway, his imposing figure blocking the exit completely. His eyes immediately found his daughter, handcuffed, bleeding, terrified, and darkened with fury. Release my daughter, now! His voice was low, controlled, but filled with unmistakable authority. The first-class cabin fell utterly silent. Even the air seemed to still. Melissa's face drained of color as recognition dawned. Mr. Wilson, we didn't know. Benson, however, remained defiant. Sir, you can't be here. This is a secure area. Gabriel stepped forward, his ID badge clearly visible. I'm Gabriel Wilson, Chief Executive Officer of SkyWest Airlines, and you have exactly 3 seconds to remove those handcuffs from my daughter before I have security remove you. I need to verify your identity, Benson stammered, suddenly less certain. Gabriel pulled out his phone and made a call. Jason, I need security at Gate 23 immediately, and contact Chicago PD. I want Officer… He glanced at Benson's badge. Kevin Benson, supervisor here now. Turning back to Benson, Gabriel's voice became dangerously quiet. The handcuffs. Remove them. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Benson fumbled with the keys, suddenly aware of dozens of phones recording his every move. Melissa stood frozen, her earlier confidence evaporated. As the handcuffs fell away, Gabriel gently pulled Zoe to him, examining the cut on her forehead. Blood had stained her collar and dried on her cheek. The sight of his child's injury ignited something primal in Gabriel's expression. Dad, Zoe whispered, collapsing against his chest in relief. I'm here now, Gabriel assured her, before turning his attention back to Benson and Melissa. You two aren't going anywhere. We're just getting started. Passengers who had been silently watching now erupted in murmurs and exclamations, the dramatic turn of events leaving them stunned. Several moved closer to better record what was unfolding. Eleanor Thompson stepped forward, her eyes filled with righteous indignation. I tried to tell them she wasn't doing anything wrong. They wouldn't listen to me either. Gabriel nodded gratefully to her before turning to address the entire cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this delay. I'd like to personally thank you for your patience as we deal with this situation. What has happened here today is unacceptable, and I assure you it will be addressed with appropriate seriousness. He turned to Captain Reynolds. David, please arrange for another aircraft and crew to take these passengers to New York. Everyone will receive full refunds and vouchers for future travel. As airline security arrived in response to Gabriel's call, the atmosphere on the plane had transformed completely. Melissa, who had been so quick to judge and condemn Zoe, now stood with her head bowed, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Officer Benson, stripped of his power and authority, looked uncertain for the first time since boarding the plane. Gabriel kept one arm around Zoe's shoulders, his protective stance making it clear to everyone present. He might run an airline, but he was a father first. And someone had hurt his child. The aircraft bridge buzzed with activity as Gabriel led Zoe to a private airport lounge, his arm never leaving her shoulders. Airport medical staff followed closely, carrying first aid supplies to treat her injury. Behind them, airline security escorted Melissa Peterson and Officer Kevin Benson, both looking significantly less confident than they had minutes earlier. Inside the VIP lounge, a doctor gently cleaned the cut on Zoe's forehead. "It's not deep enough for stitches," he explained, applying a butterfly bandage. "But you'll have a bruise for a few days." Gabriel knelt beside his daughter, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and barely contained rage. "Are you okay, Zoe?" She nodded, though her hands still trembled.
"I'm fine, Dad. Just embarrassed."
Her voice cracked on the last word. "You have nothing to be embarrassed about," Gabriel assured her firmly. "Nothing that happened today was your fault." In the corner of the lounge, Melissa shifted uncomfortably, sensing her career disintegrating with each passing minute. She cleared her throat. "Mr. Wilson, if I could explain." Gabriel stood and turned toward her slowly. His voice remained measured, but ice cold. "Explain what exactly? Why you harassed my 16-year-old daughter? Why you lied about her behavior? Or why you called security to forcibly remove her when she had a valid first-class ticket?" "I was just following protocol for suspicious passengers," Melissa defended weakly. "Suspicious?" Gabriel repeated. "What exactly was suspicious about my daughter sitting quietly in her assigned seat?" Melissa fumbled for words. She seemed out of place. Too young for first class. I thought she might have snuck on, or too young or too black, Gabriel challenged. The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and unavoidable. Officer Benson stepped forward. "Sir, with all due respect, we followed standard procedure for uncooperative passengers. Race had nothing to do with it. Standard procedure includes physically restraining minors and causing bodily harm?" Gabriel asked, gesturing to Zoe's injury. "Interesting. I'd like to see that in writing." The door to the lounge opened as Gabriel's executive team arrived. The company's general counsel, the director of operations, and the chief of customer experience. Their expressions turned grave as they assessed the situation. "I want statements from everyone involved," Gabriel instructed them. "And I want all security footage preserved. Pull the passenger manifest too. We'll need witness statements." As his team sprang into action, the lounge door opened again. Eleanor Thompson, the elderly woman who had tried to defend Zoe on the plane, entered hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said. "I just wanted to check on the young lady and offer my help. I saw everything." Gabriel crossed the room and extended his hand. "Mrs. Thompson, Eleanor Thompson," she replied, shaking his hand firmly despite her age. "What happened on that plane was a disgrace. I've been flying for 60 years, and I've never seen such blatant discrimination." "Thank you for speaking up, Mrs. Thompson," Gabriel said sincerely. "Would you be willing to provide a formal statement?" "Absolutely," Eleanor nodded. "And I'm not the only one. Several passengers were recording the whole incident. That nice young man in 4C told me he got everything on video from the first time the flight attendant questioned your daughter." Gabriel's assistant approached with a tablet. "Sir, social media is already picking this up. Several videos have been posted online in the last 10 minutes. Gabriel took the tablet, scrolling through Twitter posts showing clips of Zoe being handcuffed and Benson twisting her arm. His expression hardened as he watched his daughter's humiliation being broadcast to the world. Melissa, seeing the videos, attempted one last defense. "Mr. Wilson, please understand, from my perspective—" "From your perspective?" Gabriel interrupted. "Let me tell you about perspective, Ms. Peterson. My perspective is watching my 16-year-old honor student daughter being treated like a criminal on my own airline. My perspective is seeing her bleeding and handcuffed because she had the audacity to fly while black." Benson shifted uncomfortably. Sir, if we had known she was your daughter, that's exactly the problem. Gabriel cut him off. You shouldn't need to know that someone is the CEO's daughter to treat them with basic human dignity and respect. The director of operations approached Gabriel. The replacement aircraft is ready, sir. All passengers have been moved and upgraded to first class. They'll be departing shortly. Gabriel nodded. Good. And what about the crew? New crew assigned. Captain Reynolds has agreed to stay and provide his statement. Gabriel turned his attention back to Melissa and Officer Benson. Both of you are suspended effective immediately, pending a full investigation. This incident will not be swept under the rug. You can't suspend me, Benson protested. I don't work for you. I'm airport security. Then I'll be speaking with your supervisor and the airport authority, Gabriel replied calmly. And the videos of you assaulting a minor will be submitted as evidence. Zoe, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke up. Dad, can we just go home? I don't think I want to fly to New York today. Gabriel's expression softened immediately. Of course, sweetheart. Jason will drive us home. As they prepared to leave, Gabriel addressed the remaining executives. I want a company-wide communication about this incident by end of day. We're going to use this as a catalyst for change. This isn't just about my daughter. It's about every passenger who has ever been profiled or mistreated. He turned to the assembled group one last time. What happened today is unacceptable on any airline, but especially on mine. I built this company on the principle that the skies belong to everyone. Today, we failed that principle spectacularly. Tomorrow, we start fixing it. As Gabriel and Zoe left the lounge, Eleanor Thompson reached out and squeezed Zoe's hand. You hold your head high, young lady. You did nothing wrong. Zoe managed a small smile, the first since the ordeal began. Thank you for trying to help me. Outside, as they walked through the terminal, passengers and airport staff recognized Gabriel. Word had spread quickly and people stared as they passed. Some offered sympathetic nods. Others averted their eyes, uncomfortable with the visible reminder of injustice. Gabriel kept his arm around Zoe's shoulders, a silent promise of protection that came too late today, but would never falter again. The Wilson family home in Chicago's upscale Lincoln Park neighborhood was usually a place of warmth and laughter. Tonight, it felt like a war room. Gabriel sat at the dining table surrounded by legal documents, company files, and a laptop showing endless social media reactions to the incident. Zoe had retreated to her bedroom after dinner, emotionally exhausted from the day's events. Gabriel rubbed his temples, fighting a growing headache as he scrolled through passenger complaints filed against SkyWest over the past 5 years. The data was disturbing. Complaints from black passengers were 3 times more likely to be dismissed without investigation. Flight attendants like Melissa Peterson had multiple complaints in their files that had been ignored or downplayed by middle management. His phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Can't sleep. Can I come downstairs? Of course, he replied immediately. Moments later, Zoe appeared in the doorway, wearing pajamas and looking younger than her 16 years. The bandage on her forehead stood out starkly against her dark skin. How's your head? Gabriel asked gently. It hurts a little, she admitted, sitting beside him. What are you looking at? Trying to understand how this happened. Gabriel pushed his laptop away and turned to face his daughter. Zoe, I need to ask you something. Has anything like this happened before? Not necessarily on our airline, but anywhere? Zoe's eyes dropped to her hands. Not this bad, but yeah, sometimes. Why didn't you tell me? She shrugged. You're always so busy, and I didn't want you to worry. The words struck Gabriel like physical blows. His daughter had been suffering in silence, bearing the weight of discrimination alone because she didn't want to burden him. I'm never too busy for you, he said firmly. Never. I need to know these things. Like that time at Westfield Academy? Zoe asked quietly. Gabriel's mind flashed back to 3 years earlier. Zoe had won admission to one of Chicago's most prestigious private schools on academic merit. During orientation, a teacher had assumed she was there on a diversity scholarship rather than having scored in the top percentile on the entrance exam. Or like the mall security guard who followed me and Ashley around for an hour last summer, she continued. Or when that woman at the country club asked if I was lost because I was looking for you at the members' dinner. Each example landed like a hammer blow on Gabriel's conscience. Despite his success, despite his wealth and position, he couldn't protect his daughter from the reality of being black in America. "I'm so sorry, Zoe," he said softly. "It's not your fault, Dad." "Maybe not directly, but I've been naive. I thought," he hesitated, "I thought my position would somehow shield you, or that things had gotten better than when I was growing up." "Sometimes they have," Zoe offered. "Sometimes they haven't." Gabriel reached for his laptop again, showing Zoe what he'd discovered. "It's happening on my airline too. Look at these complaints." Together, they scrolled through dozens of reports from minority passengers who had experienced discriminatory treatment. Most had been filed away with minimal investigation. "This isn't just about what happened to you today," Gabriel said. "It's systemic, and it's happening right under my nose." His phone rang, interrupting their conversation. It was Patricia Davis, SkyWest's general counsel. "Gabriel, we've completed the preliminary review of Officer Benson's record," Patricia reported. "He has 7 excessive force complaints in the last 2 years, 3 specifically involving minority passengers. All were dismissed by his supervisor." "And Melissa Peterson?" 5 formal complaints alleging discriminatory treatment. All were handled by mid-level HR with no escalation to executive level. Standard practice was a verbal warning and online diversity training module. Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Who approved that practice?" A pause. "It appears to have been implemented under Operations Director Thomas Bradford." Bradford, one of Gabriel's first hires when he became CEO. A friend, or so he'd thought. "Keep digging, Patricia. I want to know how deep this goes." After ending the call, Gabriel noticed Zoe watching him with concern. "What happens now, Dad?" "Now we fix it," he said firmly, "starting with accountability for what happened to you." His phone buzzed again. A news alert. Gabriel opened it to find a video of Zoe being handcuffed had gone viral, already viewed over 2 million times. The comments section was a battlefield, many expressing outrage at her treatment, others defending the flight attendant and officer. "Dad, look," Zoe pointed to another news alert. SkyWest's stock had dropped 3% in after-hours trading as the video spread. Gabriel set the phone down. "The board won't like that." "Are you in trouble?" Zoe asked, her voice small. "Don't worry about that," Gabriel assured her. "This isn't about stock prices. It's about doing what's right." Their conversation was interrupted by another call, this time from Jason, Gabriel's assistant. "Sir, the crisis management team is assembled as requested, and the board chairman is demanding an emergency meeting tomorrow morning to discuss the incident." "Tell them I'll be there," Gabriel replied. "And Jason, send me everything you can find on Thomas Bradford's hiring decisions and policy implementations over the last 5 years." After hanging up, Gabriel noticed Zoe yawning despite her efforts to hide it. "You should try to get some sleep," he suggested. Zoe nodded reluctantly. "Will you be up all night?" "Probably," Gabriel admitted. "But I'll be fine." "Dad?" Zoe paused at the doorway. "I'm supposed to fly to debate nationals next month, but I don't think I want to fly anymore." The words broke Gabriel's heart. His aviation-obsessed daughter, who had grown up visiting control towers and cockpits, who dreamed of designing aircraft, was now afraid to fly. "We'll work through that together," he promised. "One day at a time." After Zoe went upstairs, Gabriel returned to his research with renewed determination. Around midnight, an email arrived from a junior IT specialist that made his blood run cold. The subject line read, "Found something you should see." Attached were dozens of internal communications showing that similar incidents had been systematically buried by certain executives. Most disturbing was an email from Bradford to the head of HR. "Wilson's diversity initiatives are hurting morale. Handle these complaints quietly until we can bring some balance back to policy." Gabriel stared at the screen, a cold realization washing over him. The discrimination wasn't just happening despite his leadership. Some within his own company were actively undermining his efforts to create an inclusive environment. His phone rang again. This time it was Eleanor Thompson, the elderly passenger who had tried to help Zoe. "Mr. Wilson, I hope I'm not calling too late. I couldn't sleep thinking about what happened to your daughter." "Not at all, Mrs. Thompson. And please, call me Gabriel." "Gabriel, then. I wanted you to know my grandson helped me upload the videos I took on the plane. They show everything from the first time that flight attendant approached your daughter. I've sent them to the email address your assistant provided." "Thank you," Gabriel said sincerely. "Your help means more than you know." "One more thing," Eleanor continued. "I've been flying SkyWest for decades. What I saw today wasn't just one bad employee, it was something deeper, something systemic." "I know," Gabriel acknowledged, "and I'm going to fix it." After saying goodbye, Gabriel checked his email and found Eleanor's videos. They were damning, clearly showing Zoe sitting quietly, Melissa's repeated harassment, and the escalation that led to Zoe's injury. There was no ambiguity, no room for interpretation, just clear, unmistakable discrimination. As dawn broke over Chicago, Gabriel had compiled a comprehensive dossier of evidence, not just about Zoe's incident, but about a pattern of discrimination within his own company that had been hidden from him. The board meeting was in 3 hours. They would demand he protect the company, minimize the scandal, settle quietly. But Gabriel had other plans. This wasn't just about his daughter anymore. It was about every passenger who had ever been profiled, every complaint that had been buried, every person who had suffered in silence. The company would face this head-on, no matter the cost. What would you do if you were in Gabriel's position? Comment number 1 if you think he should fire everyone involved immediately. Or number 2 if you believe a deeper systemic change is needed. Like this video if you've ever had to stand up against injustice in your workplace or school. And make sure you're subscribed to see how this powerful story concludes. Now, how do you think Melissa and Officer Benson will respond when they realize their careers are on the line? 3 days after the incident, Gabriel Wilson sat in his office reviewing the latest developments. The videos of Zoe's mistreatment had accumulated over 50 million views across platforms. SkyWest's stock had dropped 11%. The company's social media accounts were flooded with comments from outraged customers threatening boycotts alongside others defending Melissa and Benson. His intercom buzzed. "Sir, you need to see this," his assistant Jason said urgently. "Channel 8 News." Gabriel turned to the television mounted on his office wall and pressed the power button. The screen filled with the image of Melissa Peterson, Officer Kevin Benson, and a slick-looking attorney standing behind a podium covered in microphones. "My clients have been unfairly vilified by a powerful executive using his position to wage a personal vendetta," the attorney was saying. "This was never about race. It was about following standard security protocols that keep all passengers safe." A caption identified the attorney as James Sullivan, known for representing police officers accused of misconduct. Sullivan continued, "Ms. Peterson and Officer Benson were doing their jobs diligently when Mr. Wilson's daughter became uncooperative and disruptive. Rather than accept that his daughter might have behaved inappropriately, Mr. Wilson has used his considerable power to destroy the reputations and livelihoods of 2 dedicated public servants." Melissa stepped to the microphone, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. "I've served SkyWest passengers for 15 years with an unblemished record. I love my job and treat everyone with respect. What's happening to me now is nothing short of corporate bullying." Gabriel's phone began ringing incessantly as the press conference continued. Benson took his turn at the microphone next. "I responded to a call about an unruly passenger. At no point did I know this was the CEO's daughter, nor would it have mattered. The suggestion that I targeted her because of her race is not only false, but deeply offensive to me and my family." Sullivan returned to deliver the final blow. "Today, we are filing a lawsuit against SkyWest Airlines and Gabriel Wilson personally for wrongful termination, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We're seeking compensatory damages of $10 million and punitive damages to be determined by the court." Gabriel turned off the television, his expression unreadable. His phone showed 15 missed calls from board members, executives, and the media. Before he could process the lawsuit threat, Jason appeared at his door. "Sir, the board chairman is on line 1. He says it's urgent." Gabriel picked up the phone. "Richard, I just saw the press conference." Richard Montgomery's voice was tense. "This is getting out of control, Gabriel. The stock is in free fall. Major shareholders are panicking. We need to settle this quietly and move on." "Settle?" Gabriel repeated. "Did you see what they did to my daughter?" "Of course, and it's inexcusable," Richard replied carefully. "But we're talking about the survival of the company now. The board is calling for an emergency meeting at 4 today. We need to discuss options." The implication was clear. The board was questioning his leadership. "I'll be there," Gabriel said tersely before hanging up. His phone immediately rang again. This time it was Patricia Davis, the general counsel. "Gabriel, Sullivan's team is moving fast. They've subpoenaed Zoe's school records and social media accounts. They're looking for anything they can use to paint her as problematic." "They're going after my 16-year-old daughter now?" Gabriel's voice was dangerously quiet. "It gets worse. They're claiming you've used company resources for a personal vendetta, which would be a breach of fiduciary duty. Some board members are concerned." Gabriel thanked Patricia for the update and ended the call. He sat still for a moment, processing the rapid escalation. Then he pressed the intercom. "Jason, get me everything you can find on James Sullivan, and I need to speak with Thomas Bradford immediately." While waiting for Bradford, Gabriel checked his personal email. The subject line of the newest message made his stomach clench. "Your daughter should watch her back." It was one of dozens of threatening messages they'd received since the incident went viral. Gabriel had hired private security for their home after the first wave of threats, but each new one still sent ice through his veins. The door opened and Thomas Bradford entered without knocking. At 55, Bradford had the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power. He'd been with SkyWest for 20 years, longer than Gabriel himself. "You wanted to see me?" Bradford asked, his tone just short of insubordinate. Gabriel gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Thomas. I think it's time we had an honest conversation." Bradford remained standing. "If this is about the Peterson incident, I've already told HR everything I know." "I found your emails," Gabriel said flatly. "The ones where you instructed HR to bury discrimination complaints. The ones where you referred to my diversity initiatives as hurting morale." Bradford's expression flickered briefly before settling into practiced neutrality. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't insult my intelligence," Gabriel replied, sliding printouts of the emails across his desk. "You've been systematically undermining company policy." Bradford glanced at the emails, then straightened his shoulders. "The board will be interested to hear how you're using IT resources to spy on executives who disagree with your approach." "Disagreeing with my approach is one thing. Creating an environment where my own daughter can be assaulted on my airline is something else entirely." "No one knew she was your daughter," Bradford countered. "That's exactly the point." Gabriel's fist hit the desk. "No passenger should be treated that way, regardless of who they are or who their parents might be." Bradford's expression hardened. "You're making this personal, Gabriel. That's going to be your downfall." "Is that a threat?" "An observation," Bradford replied coolly. "The board meeting is in 2 hours. I suggest you prepare your defense carefully." After Bradford left, Gabriel received another update from Jason. Sullivan had arranged for protesters to gather outside SkyWest headquarters, carrying signs reading "Safety First" and "Support our flight crews." The news coverage had shifted too. Several outlets were now framing the story as privileged CEO's revenge, rather than discrimination. Commentators questioned whether Gabriel was using his power to wage a personal vendetta. Others suggested Zoe might have been partially responsible for the escalation. Gabriel's phone rang again. This time it was Zoe. "Dad, have you seen what they're saying about me online?" Her voice trembled. "They found my Instagram, and they're saying I'm spoiled and entitled. Some of my classmates are sharing it." Gabriel closed his eyes, his worst fears realized. "I'm so sorry, Zoe. We'll get through this. There was a car following us on the way to school this morning. she continued.
Mom says it was probably just a reporter, but it was scary.
Gabriel made a mental note to increase security for both Zoe and her mother, his ex-wife. "Come straight home after school," he instructed. "Don't talk to anyone you don't know, and stay off social media for now." After reassuring Zoe as best he could, Gabriel prepared for the board meeting. As he gathered his materials, Jason appeared with one final update.
"Sir, we just received word that 3 major board members met privately with Bradford last night, and there's a rumor they're discussing CEO succession plans."
Gabriel absorbed this final betrayal silently. The company he had built, the airline he had transformed from regional carrier to industry leader, was slipping away from him, all because he refused to accept the mistreatment of his daughter, and by extension, countless other passengers who lacked his platform and power. As he walked toward the boardroom, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It contained a photo of their home with a crude threat scrawled across it. Gabriel stopped cold, his priorities suddenly crystal clear. The company might be in jeopardy, his career might be on the line, but his daughter's safety was non-negotiable. He changed direction, heading for his private elevator instead of the boardroom. The board would have to wait. He needed to get Zoe somewhere safe first. As the elevator descended, Gabriel made 2 calls. The first was to his security team, instructing them to meet him at Zoe's school immediately. The second was to Raymond Jenkins, his longtime mentor and former airline executive who had first hired Gabriel as a baggage handler 30 years ago. "Raymond, I need your help," Gabriel said as soon as the older man answered. "It's about Zoe." "I saw the news," Raymond replied gravely. "Tell me what you need." "They're coming after her to get to me. I need somewhere safe for her to stay while I handle this." "Bring her to my lake house," Raymond offered without hesitation. "No one will find her there." "Thank you," Gabriel said, relief evident in his voice. "There's something else. I need you to connect me with Victoria Davis." Victoria Davis was one of the country's most prominent civil rights attorneys, known for taking on systemic discrimination cases against major corporations. "You're going to fight," Raymond observed. "All the way," Gabriel confirmed. "This isn't just about Zoe anymore. It's about every passenger who doesn't have a CEO father to protect them." "The board will fight back," Raymond warned. "They might remove you." Gabriel stepped out of the elevator, his resolve hardening with each step toward the exit. Let them try. The Davis & Associates law offices occupied the 27th floor of a sleek downtown building. Victoria Davis sat across from Gabriel, reviewing the evidence he'd compiled. At 62, Victoria had the sharp eyes of someone who had spent decades identifying injustice and the confidence of someone who had spent just as long fighting it. "This is compelling," she said, setting down a file containing passenger complaints. "The pattern is clear." Gabriel nodded, fatigue evident in his eyes. The past week had been brutal. Zoe was staying at Raymond's lake house, missing school but safe from harassment. The board had voted to place Gabriel on administrative leave pending an investigation into his handling of the incident. Bradford had been named acting CEO. "What bothers me most," Gabriel admitted, "is how easily they've shifted the narrative. Somehow my daughter became the aggressor and Melissa became the victim." "That's how power protects itself," Victoria replied, "by making the victim look unreasonable for demanding justice." She opened another file. "These emails from Bradford and his team are particularly damning. They show intentional suppression of discrimination complaints. That's not just morally wrong, it's legally actionable." Gabriel leaned forward. "I don't just want to win a lawsuit, Victoria. I want to change the company. I want to make sure what happened to Zoe never happens to another passenger." Victoria studied him thoughtfully. "Even if it cost you your job?" Even then, Victoria's assistant knocked and entered with an envelope. "This just arrived by courier. It's marked urgent." Victoria opened it and smiled as she scanned the contents. "Well, it seems we have an ally. Eleanor Thompson has provided notarized statements from 12 other passengers on that flight, all confirming Zoe did nothing wrong." Gabriel remembered the elderly woman who had tried to help Zoe on the plane. She mentioned her grandson was helping her compile videos. "Martin Thompson, Victoria nodded. 25. Tech genius. He's created a timeline using footage from multiple passengers that shows the entire incident from different angles. It completely contradicts Melissa and Benson's version of events. Hope flickered in Gabriel's expression for the first time in days. Victoria continued reviewing documents. There's more. Your IT specialist, Jamie Chen, has recovered security footage from the plane that was supposedly corrupted during upload to the server. Supposedly. It appears someone tried to delete it, Victoria explained. The footage clearly shows Melissa targeting Zoe from the moment she boarded, while treating other passengers completely differently. Gabriel's phone buzzed with a text from Raymond. Zoe's doing better today. She's helping me with my memoirs and asking lots of questions about the old days of aviation. The message brought a brief smile to Gabriel's face. At least his daughter was safe. Victoria was still sorting through files when her assistant entered again, this time with a different envelope. This came through our anonymous whistleblower portal, she explained, handing it to Victoria. Inside was a USB drive and a note. I can't stand what's happening. These were supposed to be destroyed. Victoria plugged the drive into her computer. It contained hundreds of HR files, complaints from minority passengers and employees that had been marked resolved, despite no actual resolution. This is gold, Victoria murmured. Whoever sent this just handed us evidence of systematic discrimination. Gabriel's phone rang. It was Jason, still loyal despite Gabriel's administrative leave. Sir, something's happening, Jason reported. A group of SkyWest flight attendants has formed a coalition called SkyWest for Equality. They're publicly supporting you and sharing their own experiences of reporting discrimination and being ignored. How many? Gabriel asked. Over 300 so far, from all major hubs. They're demanding Bradford's resignation and your reinstatement. After the call, Gabriel updated Victoria on this new development. The tide is turning, she observed. Now we need to capitalize on it. They spent the next 2 days preparing for the emergency board meeting scheduled for Friday. Bradford had been forced to call it after shareholders began questioning his temporary leadership. The meeting would determine SkyWest's direction and Gabriel's future with the company. The night before the meeting, Gabriel received an unexpected visitor at his hotel suite. It was Raymond Jenkins, his mentor. Zoe wanted me to give you this, Raymond said, handing Gabriel a folder. Inside was a carefully researched presentation titled Creating a More Equitable SkyWest, a Comprehensive Plan. Zoe had compiled statistics, best practices from other industries, and specific policy recommendations. She worked on this all week, Raymond explained. Said if you were going to fight for your job tomorrow, you should have ammunition. Gabriel felt a surge of pride. Even in the midst of her own trauma, Zoe was thinking about the bigger picture. How is she really doing? He asked. Raymond considered the question carefully. She's resilient, angry too, which is healthy. But mostly, she's determined not to let this define her. Like her father, Raymond added with a knowing smile. The morning of the board meeting, Gabriel received a call from Victoria. We have a new ally, she announced. Kevin Benson's former partner has come forward. Says Benson has a history of excessive force against minorities that his supervisors covered up. He's willing to testify. Why now? Gabriel asked. Apparently, he tried to report Benson multiple times and was ignored. Seeing what happened to Zoe was the last straw. When Gabriel arrived at SkyWest headquarters, he was met with a surprise. Dozens of employees had gathered in the lobby, wearing buttons that read, SkyWest for Equality. They applauded as he walked through. Jason met him at the elevator. Sir, there's something you should see before the meeting. He handed Gabriel his tablet, showing a live news broadcast. Melissa Peterson was giving another interview, but something had changed. She looked nervous, less confident. I may have misinterpreted the situation, she was saying carefully. Upon reflection, and after reviewing the videos, I can see how my actions might have been influenced by unconscious bias. She's backing down, Gabriel realized. Sullivan dropped her as a client this morning, Jason explained. The evidence was too overwhelming. When Gabriel entered the boardroom, he was prepared for hostility. Instead, he found a subdued atmosphere. Board members avoided eye contact as he took his seat. Bradford sat at the head of the table, looking significantly less comfortable than he had a week ago. "Let's begin," Bradford announced. "We're here to discuss the future leadership of SkyWest Airlines in light of recent events." Before he could continue, the boardroom door opened. Eleanor Thompson entered, followed by Victoria Davis and, to Gabriel's surprise, Zoe. "What is this?" Bradford demanded. "The truth," Eleanor replied simply, taking a seat. Zoe locked eyes with her father across the room, giving him a small nod of encouragement. She had prepared for this moment, ready to face the people who had tried to discredit her. The tide had turned. Now it was time for the truth to be heard. The boardroom crackled with tension as Bradford struggled to regain control of the meeting. "This is highly irregular," he protested, glaring at the unexpected arrivals. "This is a closed board session." Victoria Davis stepped forward, her tailored suit and confident stance marking her as a formidable presence. "Actually, as legal counsel representing both Gabriel and Zoe Wilson in matters directly relevant to this meeting's agenda, I have every right to be here." "And the others?" Bradford gestured dismissively toward Eleanor Thompson and Zoe. "Key witnesses to the incident under discussion," Victoria replied smoothly. "Unless you'd prefer to make decisions without all the facts." Richard Montgomery, the board chairman, cleared his throat. "Thomas, I believe we should hear them out. This situation has escalated beyond our control." Bradford's jaw tightened, but he nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but we follow proper procedure. I'll present the case for leadership transition first, as acting CEO." For the next 30 minutes, Bradford outlined his version of events. Gabriel had overreacted to a routine security incident, misused company resources for personal vendettas, and damaged SkyWest's reputation and stock value in the process. He portrayed Melissa and Benson as dedicated professionals who had followed protocol and were now victims of an overzealous executive's rage. "The simple fact," Bradford concluded, "is that Gabriel Wilson has demonstrated he cannot separate his personal feelings from his professional responsibilities. This company needs leadership that prioritizes all stakeholders, not just the CEO's family members." Several board members nodded, particularly those with long-standing ties to Bradford. Others remained carefully neutral, watching the room's dynamics unfold. "Now," Bradford said with forced pleasantness, "I believe Mr. Wilson would like to respond." Gabriel rose slowly, surveying the faces around the table. Some of these people had been his allies for years. Others had always resisted his vision for the company. All of them now held his professional fate in their hands. "Before I begin," Gabriel said, "I'd like to play something for you." He nodded to Jason, who connected a laptop to the room's audio-visual system. The large screen on the wall flickered to life, showing security footage from Flight 237. The video began with Zoe boarding the plane, taking her assigned first-class seat and quietly opening her notebook. It continued, showing every interaction with Melissa, the repeated questioning, the clear contrast in how white passengers were treated, the escalating harassment despite Zoe's polite responses. Board members shifted uncomfortably as they watched Officer Benson's arrival and the physical confrontation that led to Zoe's injury. The footage was clear, unambiguous, and damning. When the video ended, the room fell silent. Gabriel let the silence stretch, allowing the images to sink in. "What you just witnessed," he finally said, "wasn't a routine security incident. It was discrimination, plain and simple. And it happened on my airline." He moved around the table slowly as he spoke. "For 7 years, I've led SkyWest with a simple philosophy. The skies belong to everyone. I believed we were building an airline where all passengers would be treated with dignity and respect." Gabriel stopped behind Bradford's chair. "What I didn't realize was that some within our own leadership were actively undermining that vision." He nodded to Victoria, who distributed folders to each board member. "These documents show a systematic pattern of burying discrimination complaints under Mr. Bradford's direction. Over 300 incidents in the past 5 years, all marked resolved, despite no meaningful action being taken. Bradford's face flushed. This is a gross mischaracterization. Your emails say otherwise, Gabriel interrupted, his voice hardening. Specifically, your instructions to HR to handle these complaints quietly, because my diversity initiatives were hurting morale. Several board members were now flipping through the documents, expressions growing increasingly troubled. This isn't about what happened to my daughter, Gabriel continued. It's about a culture that made what happened to her possible. A culture that some in this room deliberately fostered while hiding it from me and this board. Victoria stepped forward. We've also prepared a financial analysis of the potential liability SkyWest faces from these buried complaints. Conservative estimates put it at over $200 million in settlements and legal fees. That number sent a visible shockwave through the room. Richard Montgomery removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Gabriel, what exactly are you proposing here? Before Gabriel could answer, Zoe stood up. At 16, she was the youngest person in the room by decades, but she carried herself with remarkable poise. May I speak? She asked. Richard looked surprised, but nodded. My name is Zoe Wilson. A week ago, I was assaulted on a SkyWest plane because of the color of my skin. Her voice was steady, though Gabriel could see the emotion she was controlling. I've spent my entire life loving aviation. My dream has always been to design aircraft for this company someday. She held up the folders she'd prepared at Raymond's Lake House. I've created a comprehensive plan for addressing discrimination at SkyWest. Not with empty diversity training sessions, but with concrete policy changes, accountability metrics, and independent oversight. Zoe handed her proposal to Richard. What happened to me was traumatic, but I'm not here for sympathy or special treatment. I'm here because no passenger should ever experience what I did, especially not on an airline that claims the skies belong to everyone. The room fell silent again as Zoe retook her seat. Eleanor Thompson reached over and squeezed her hand in solidarity. Bradford attempted to regain control. This is all very touching, but it doesn't address the central issue. Gabriel Wilson violated his fiduciary duty to this company by pursuing a personal agenda. Victoria countered immediately. On the contrary, Mr. Wilson's fiduciary duty includes protecting the company from liability and reputational damage. The evidence shows he discovered a significant legal and ethical issue that had been deliberately hidden from him. His actions were entirely appropriate. Eleanor Thompson raised her hand. May I say something? Richard nodded, looking increasingly overwhelmed by the meeting's direction. I'm 82 years old, Eleanor began. I've been flying since segregated seating was still legal on buses and in restaurants. What I witnessed on that plane wasn't just one bad employee having a bad day. It was the kind of systematic discrimination I've seen my entire life, just wearing a different uniform. She looked directly at each board member. I've been a loyal SkyWest customer for 40 years, but after what I saw, I can't in good conscience continue flying with you unless real change happens. And I suspect many others feel the same way. As if on cue, Jason approached Gabriel and whispered something in his ear. Gabriel addressed the board again. I've just been informed that the SkyWest for Equality Coalition has now grown to over 2,000 employees. They're currently holding a press conference in the lobby, calling for meaningful reform and new leadership. Bradford stood abruptly. This is nothing short of a coup. Wilson has orchestrated this entire spectacle to save his job. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway. He didn't orchestrate anything. All heads turned to see James Carson, one of the most conservative board members and historically one of Bradford's strongest allies. He entered carrying his own stack of documents. I've spent the past week conducting my own investigation, Carson explained. Not because I initially believed Gabriel, but because the numbers weren't adding up. Customer complaints up 30% year over year, yet reported incidents of discrimination down? That defied statistical probability. He dropped his findings on the table. What I discovered was disturbing. Not only were complaints being buried, But Bradford and his team were actively retaliating against employees who raised concerns. Carson turned to Bradford, his expression cold. "You lied to this board, Thomas, repeatedly and deliberately." Bradford looked around the room, realizing his support was evaporating. "This is absurd. I've given 20 years to this company. Everything I've done has been to protect SkyWest's interests." "By allowing discrimination?" Gabriel challenged. "By creating an environment where a 16-year-old girl could be assaulted on our flagship route and your first instinct was to cover it up?" Bradford's face contorted with fury. She was uncooperative. And frankly, if she'd been taught proper respect for authority, "That's enough." Richard Montgomery slammed his hand on the table. "Mr. Bradford, I suggest you stop speaking before you dig yourself a deeper hole." The room fell silent as Richard conferred quietly with several other board members. Finally, he addressed the group. "I believe we've heard enough to make an informed decision. We'll now vote on two matters: the leadership of SkyWest Airlines going forward and the adoption of Ms. Wilson's anti-discrimination proposal as a framework for reform." Bradford made one last desperate attempt. "This is a railroad job. I demand—" "You're in no position to demand anything," Richard cut him off. "The vote will proceed." One by one, board members cast their votes. The outcome was clear before they finished. Gabriel would be reinstated as CEO. Bradford would be terminated for cause, and Zoe's proposal would be adopted as the foundation for comprehensive reform. As the meeting concluded, Gabriel approached his daughter and embraced her. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. Zoe smiled through tears. "We did it, Dad." Eleanor Thompson watched them with satisfaction. "Justice is rare enough that we should celebrate when it actually happens," she observed. Outside the boardroom, Jason waited with news that the SkyWest stock had already begun to recover as word of the leadership decision spread. Gabriel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past week lifting from his shoulders. There was still much work to be done, systems to reform, and trust to rebuild. But for the first time since Zoe's call had been cut off on that plane, he felt hopeful about the future. The sky truly could belong to everyone. Today was just the beginning. 6 months later, Zoe Wilson stood at Gate 37 in O'Hare International Airport, staring through the massive windows at the SkyWest Boeing 787 that would take her to New York. Her heart pounded in her chest, palms sweaty as she clutched her boarding pass. "You don't have to do this today," Gabriel said gently, standing beside her. "We could drive or take the train." Zoe shook her head, determination visible in her expression. "No, I need to do this." It was her first flight since the incident that had transformed not just her life, but an entire airline. The months since that fateful board meeting had been a whirlwind of change, challenge, and ultimately, progress. Melissa Peterson had been terminated from SkyWest, her lawsuit against the company withdrawn after the overwhelming evidence made it untenable. More significantly, she had issued a public apology and begun working with anti-racism organizations to share her story as a cautionary tale about unconscious bias. Officer Kevin Benson had faced more serious consequences. The investigation into his conduct revealed a pattern of excessive force against minorities that could no longer be ignored. He had been terminated from airport security and now faced criminal charges for assault. James Sullivan's law firm had quietly dropped both clients after the full evidence emerged, distancing themselves from a case they now recognized as indefensible. But the most profound changes had happened within SkyWest itself. Under Gabriel's renewed leadership, and guided by Zoe's framework, the airline had implemented sweeping reforms. An independent oversight committee had been established to review all discrimination complaints, chaired by Eleanor Thompson, whose moral courage had helped turn the tide. Every employee, from baggage handlers to executives, underwent comprehensive anti-discrimination training developed in partnership with civil rights organizations. Hiring and promotion practices were overhauled to eliminate systemic barriers for minorities, resulting in the most diverse leadership team in the airline's history. A zero-tolerance policy for discrimination was implemented, with clear accountability measures that couldn't be circumvented by middle management. Most significantly, SkyWest had become a vocal advocate for industry-wide change, with Gabriel using his platform to challenge other airlines to examine their own practices. "Final boarding call for SkyWest Flight 237 to New York LaGuardia," announced the gate agent. Zoe took a deep breath. "That's me." Gabriel hugged his daughter tightly. "Call me when you land." "I will," she promised. "And don't worry so much. I helped design the new policies, remember? This flight will be fine." As Zoe approached the gate, the agent checking boarding passes smiled warmly. "Ms. Wilson, we've been expecting you. Captain Roberts asked me to let you know she'd be honored if you'd visit the cockpit before takeoff." Zoe smiled. Captain Amara Roberts was one of SkyWest's most experienced pilots and one of the first black women to reach the rank of captain at a major airline. She had become a mentor to Zoe during the past months, encouraging her aviation engineering aspirations. Boarding the plane felt surreal. Zoe's hands trembled slightly as she stepped through the doorway where 6 months earlier, her father had confronted Officer Benson. The first-class cabin where she'd been handcuffed and humiliated now felt like a different world. The flight attendant greeting passengers was Carlos Mendez, part of the new crew that had been carefully selected for this symbolic flight. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Wilson," he said warmly. "It's an honor to have you with us today." As Zoe settled into her seat, 3A, the same as before, she noticed subtle changes throughout the cabin. QR codes on seatback cards directed passengers to SkyWest's new feedback system, designed to ensure complaints couldn't be buried. The safety video now featured diverse crew members and passengers. Small changes, perhaps, but representing a fundamental shift in culture. Captain Roberts emerged from the cockpit to personally welcome Zoe. "We're making history every day," she told the teenager quietly, "sometimes painfully, but always moving forward." When the plane took off, Zoe felt a weight lifting from her shoulders along with the aircraft. She had feared this moment for months, had awakened from nightmares of being handcuffed and humiliated again. But here she was, flying once more. Back in Chicago, Gabriel sat in his office reviewing the latest diversity metrics. The door opened, and Raymond Jenkins entered using his honorary emeritus access card. "How's our girl doing?" the older man asked, settling into a chair. "Just took off," Gabriel replied, checking his phone. "She texted that Captain Roberts invited her to the cockpit." Raymond nodded approvingly. From trauma to transformation. Not many 16-year-olds could have handled this the way she did. "She's extraordinary," Gabriel agreed. "But she shouldn't have had to be." "No," Raymond acknowledged. "She shouldn't have." Gabriel gestured to the stack of reports on his desk. "Applications from minority candidates up 40%. Customer satisfaction scores rebounding. Even the stock price has recovered completely. And, more importantly," Raymond added, "no more Zoes being harassed on your planes." Gabriel nodded solemnly. "That's the real measure of success." His phone rang, the general counsel's office. "Victoria says the settlement with the class action plaintiffs is finalized," Gabriel reported after taking the call. "All 327 passengers who filed discrimination complaints over the past 5 years will receive compensation and a formal apology." Raymond smiled. Justice delayed, but not denied. In New York, Zoe's plane touched down smoothly at LaGuardia. As passengers prepared to deplane, Carlos made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, SkyWest Airlines is committed to ensuring every passenger is treated with dignity and respect. If you have feedback about your flight experience today, positive or negative, please use the QR code on your seatback card. Every voice matters." It was a small thing, these standardized announcements now made on every SkyWest flight. But to Zoe, it represented something profound, institutional acknowledgement that problems couldn't be solved if they remained hidden. As she exited the plane, Zoe found herself face to face with Eleanor Thompson, waiting at the gate with her grandson Martin. "Welcome to New York, dear," Eleanor said, embracing Zoe warmly. "Mrs. Thompson, what are you doing here?" Oversight committee business, Eleanor explained with a wink. And I thought you might appreciate a friendly face at the end of your first flight back. Martin grinned. Plus, Grandma wanted to make sure you were really okay. She's been worried. Eleanor swatted her grandson playfully. Hush, you. Together, they walked through the terminal. 3 people from different generations who had been strangers 6 months ago, now connected by shared purpose. Your anti-discrimination framework is being adopted by 2 other airlines, Eleanor informed Zoe proudly. Your father just signed the consultation agreements yesterday. Zoe smiled. That's not why I did it, but I'm glad. Why did you do it? Martin asked curiously. Zoe considered the question carefully. Because the sky should belong to everyone, she finally replied, echoing her father's long-held philosophy. And because sometimes the only way past trauma is through purpose. Back in Chicago, Gabriel stood at his office window, watching planes take off and land in perfect choreography. His phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Landed safely. Mrs. Thompson was waiting for me, having lunch with her and Martin before my NYU tour. Gabriel smiled, feeling a complex mixture of pride, relief, and lingering anger at what his daughter had endured. But mostly, he felt hope. Hope that the painful lessons of 6 months ago would continue to create ripples of change throughout the industry and beyond. On his desk sat a framed photograph, not the one of him and Zoe in SkyWest uniforms that had been ignored by Officer Benson, but a new one. It showed Zoe standing confidently in front of a SkyWest plane, surrounded by the diverse team of executives, attorneys, and advocates who had helped transform a moment of injustice into a movement for change. The caption beneath the photo read, "The sky belongs to everyone." 3 months later, Zoe stood before a packed auditorium at her high school's spring leadership conference. As founder of Students Against Transportation Discrimination, she had been invited to share her story and the changes it had sparked. What happened to me was not unique, she told the audience of peers, teachers, and community leaders. The only unique part was that my father had the power to do something about it. For every story like mine that makes headlines, thousands go unheard and unaddressed. She clicked to the next slide in her presentation, showing statistics on discrimination in transportation, airports, airlines, trains, ride shares, and taxis. Transportation is where public life happens, Zoe continued. It's where we all should have equal access and equal treatment. When discrimination occurs in these spaces, it's not just an inconvenience. It's a statement about who belongs and who doesn't. In the audience, Gabriel watched his daughter with quiet pride. The traumatized teenager who had been afraid to fly again had transformed her pain into purpose, becoming an eloquent advocate for change far beyond the confines of one airline. Across town, Eleanor Thompson sat in a SkyWest conference room with the newly formed Passenger Advocacy Board, reviewing the latest quarterly report on discrimination complaints. The numbers showed a steep decline, but more importantly, every complaint had been thoroughly investigated and addressed. Progress, Eleanor nodded approvingly. Real progress. At O'Hare International Airport, Carlos Mendez, now promoted to lead flight attendant, conducted a training session for new crew members. The most important thing to remember, he told them, is that your assumptions about passengers can cause real harm. Each person who boards this aircraft deserves the same respect and courtesy, regardless of how they look, what they wear, or where they sit. He displayed a photo of Zoe Wilson. This young woman's experience changed our airline forever. Let her story remind you of your responsibility to every passenger. At NYU's engineering department, Dean Patricia Okafor reviewed Zoe's early admission application with interest. The personal essay detailed how the incident had strengthened her resolve to pursue aviation engineering. "I want to design aircraft where everyone feels welcome," Zoe had written. "The engineering challenges are technical, but the purpose is profoundly human, to connect people across distances and differences." Dean Okafor placed the application in the accepted pile without hesitation. In a Chicago courtroom, Kevin Benson stood as the judge delivered his sentence for assault and civil rights violations. The former security officer had been found guilty on all counts, his previous pattern of excessive force finally exposed. The authority entrusted to law enforcement comes with the highest responsibility, the judge stated firmly. When that authority is abused, particularly along racial lines, it damages not just individual victims, but the very fabric of our society. Benson was sentenced to 18 months in prison and 3 years of probation, a rare case of accountability in a system often resistant to it. Back at SkyWest headquarters, Gabriel finished reviewing the quarterly financial reports with satisfaction. The airline had not only recovered from the crisis, but was thriving, with passenger numbers and employee satisfaction at all-time highs. "Doing the right thing turned out to be good business after all," he remarked to Jason. "Was there ever any doubt?" his loyal assistant replied. Gabriel thought about the board meeting 6 months earlier, how close he had come to losing everything because he refused to accept injustice. "There were moments," he admitted. That evening, Gabriel and Zoe had dinner with Raymond Jenkins at his lakeside home, the place that had provided sanctuary during their darkest days. "I have news," Zoe announced as they finished dessert. "NYU accepted me for early admission to the engineering program." "That's wonderful," Raymond exclaimed. "Though I'm not surprised. They'd be fools not to take you." "They're also offering a full scholarship," Zoe added. "But the best part is this. They want me to help develop a course on ethical engineering and transportation equity." Gabriel reached across the table and squeezed his daughter's hand. "You've turned trauma into triumph, Zoe. I couldn't be prouder." Later, as father and daughter drove home along the lakefront, Zoe gazed out at the night sky where stars competed with airplane lights. "Do you think things are really changing, Dad? Not just at SkyWest, but everywhere?" Gabriel considered the question carefully. "Change isn't a destination. It's a journey. We've taken important steps, but there will always be more work to do. The key is to keep moving forward, even when it's difficult." Zoe nodded thoughtfully. "I used to dream about designing planes. Now I dream about designing a world where everyone can move through it safely, regardless of what they look like." "That's a bigger engineering challenge," Gabriel smiled. "But worth solving," Zoe replied with conviction. The next morning, a new SkyWest commercial debuted nationwide. It showed diverse passengers being welcomed aboard by equally diverse crew members. The final shot featured a teenage girl sketching airplane designs by a window seat as the plane soared through clouds. The tagline was simple but powerful: "The sky belongs to everyone." In airports across America, the advertisement played on terminal screens. Passengers paused to watch, many unaware of the real story that had inspired it. But for those who knew, those who had followed Zoe's journey from victim to advocate, it represented something profound: how a single moment of injustice, when confronted with courage and conviction, could spark transformation far beyond one flight, one airline, or one industry. As Zoe had told her fellow students, change begins when someone stands up and says, "This is wrong." It continues when others join them and say, "We can do better." And it succeeds when institutions finally say, "Never again." What do you think would have happened if Gabriel Wilson hadn't been the CEO? Would justice have been served for Zoe? Have you ever witnessed discrimination in public spaces and wished you had the power to change things? Comment below with your thoughts and experiences. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of justice and transformation. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that standing up against injustice matters, even when it's difficult. Thank you for watching, and remember, the sky and every public space belongs to everyone. Zoe's experience reveals a harsh truth. Privilege often determines whether justice is served. While her father's position as CEO enabled swift action, countless others faced discrimination without such powerful advocates. The real lesson lies not in Gabriel's ability to enact change, but in how systemic discrimination thrives when accountability structures fail. True transformation requires more than addressing individual incidents. It demands examining the systems that allow discrimination to persist unchallenged. Eleanor's courage in speaking up, Zoe's resilience in creating solutions rather than seeking revenge, and Gabriel's willingness to confront problems within his own organization all demonstrate different forms of leadership. Change rarely comes easily. The resistance Gabriel faced from his own board illustrates how deeply entrenched discriminatory practices can become, defended by those who benefit from the status quo. Yet the story also shows that when brave individuals unite around a common purpose, they can dismantle unjust systems and build something better. The most powerful change happens when those with privilege use it to amplify marginalized voices rather than simply protecting their own. Has this story touched something in you? Perhaps you've witnessed discrimination and stayed silent, or maybe you've experienced it yourself. Your voice matters in this conversation. Comment below with a time you stood up against injustice or wish you had. Your story might inspire someone else to find their courage. If you believe in a world where everyone deserves equal dignity and respect regardless of their skin color, hit that like button to help this message reach more people. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that challenge us to examine our own biases and create positive change in our communities. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the real impact of racial discrimination, or with someone fighting their own battle for justice who needs to know they're not alone. Together, we can build a world where no one has to experience what Zoe did, where the sky truly belongs to everyone. Thank you for being part of this important conversation. Remember, change begins with awareness, but only succeeds with action.